Hello, fellow Star Trek fans. Welcome back to a brand new episode of 10 Forward with myself and the lovely Jodi Pickens. Jodi, how are you doing this week?
Doing great, Mike.
Well, we're 7 episodes in.
I know. I say this every week, but
It's kind of
I'm not happy about it.
Isn't it? That we've only got 3 episodes left.
It is. And I mean, it's a good thing. We've had good Trek, I guess.
I would say 6 fantastic episodes and 1 meh episode so far.
See, this is where we disagree, but it's okay. That's what this is about.
Yep,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, 3 episodes left. I feel a lot to cover in 3 episodes. So
yep, absolutely.
Fingers crossed.
There is a lot to cover in 3 episodes. Will they cover all the things we want them to cover? That is a very different story. So who knows on that?
Right.
So without further ado then, let's get into this week's episode, which is Season 3, Episode 7. The title of the episode is This Is Starfleet. Right from the opening, you know that this is not a standard Star Trek episode. Instead of our usual adventure format, we're presented with something new, a documentary. The screen fades with a message from Starfleet Command stating that what we're about to see was declassified under the United Federation of Planets Freedom of Information Act. What follows, we're told, is a film by documentarian Umberto Ortegas. His stated goal is transparency, but as the episode unfolds, it becomes clear that he's not just here to record, but to also challenge. The voiceover opens to the documentary, asks poignant questions. What is Starfleet? They claim duty, honor, and peacekeeping, but what separates a federation from an empire? Both, after all, colonize, both impose laws and doctrines, and, well, what is a starship? An explorer's vessel or a warship? After all, they're heavily armed, and it's proactive framing, as it just sort of sets the tone for everything that follows. The first part of the film focuses on the Enterprise crew themselves, one by one as Ortegas turns his lens towards them. Captain Pike sticks to the official line, speaking of exploration and the Federation's ideals. Erica Ortegas, because the filmmaker is actually her brother, lets her guard down just a little bit. She acknowledges the paradox of Starfleet. You arm yourself for defense, but those same weapons make you look like conquerors. La'an Noonien Singh is asked directly about combat, particularly against the Gorn. Her response is, well, let's face it, blunt and chilling. If you can't fire first, you better be able to run. It's a reminder that, well, for her, survival has always been personal. Spock is next, and his conversation takes more of a kind of personal turn. He explains that how his Vulcan half allows him to lead with logic, but when pressed about his human side, we learn that pain comes with it. As a boy, he once ran into the desert, desperate to cut away the human part of himself after being told that he wasn't truly Vulcan. It paints Spock not only as logical, but deeply scarred, and still navigating that duality. Number 1, Una Chin Riley, presents a picture of discipline and loyalty. For her, the role as first officer is about supporting the captain, keeping the mission first, and staying within the parameters no matter the cost. Uhura, by contrast, reflects on the uncertainty of Starfleet life. Sometimes they don't know what they're getting into until they arrive. For her, communication is both a duty and a lifeline. From there, the episode shifts. Text screen tells us on Stardate 2177.9, Lutani 7 was attacked by its sister planet, Kassar. The war has claimed millions of lives, and now the Enterprise has been ordered to deliver supplies and something else, something classified. That turns out to be the Jacaro, a massive living creature, technically livestock, but clearly engineered or exploited as a weapon. As the Enterprise tries to tow the creature, the Lutani ships attack it, prompting the Jacaro to unleash devastating radiation bursts. Spock even mind melds with it, sensing both pain and aggression. Starfleet's intentions become increasingly suspect, and they are delivering aid, or are they smuggling a biological weapon into a war zone? At this point, the documentary questions deepen. Dr. Mbenga is pressed about his past, and his file reveals him as a former Special Forces operative, codenamed the Ghost, with redacted missions and confirmed kills. The contrast between healer and soldier becomes stark. We ask When asked directly if he's ever scrubbed logs to cover up violence, he simply repeats, "I do not recall." For Uhura, the questions cut even closer to home. She learns that during filming, her old roommate from the academy was lost on the Cayuga. It's raw, emotional, and underscores that every officer carries the grief into their duty. As the Enterprise struggles with Jacaro, the tension between orders and morality comes to a head. Pike wrestles with Starfleet Command's directives, either deliver the creature or destroy it, but both options compromise his ideals. Uhura and Spock argue that the creature is sentient and it deserves communication, not control. In one harrowing sequence, Spock and Chapel nearly die after a mind meld attempt, forcing Uhura to sort of step in and bridge the gap herself, mimicking the creature's sounds until it becomes clear. It doesn't want to be a weapon. It wants to end its life and spare the fate for its children. This leads to the episode's most tragic moment. With Pike's reluctant order, the Enterprise escorts the Jacaro to the system's sun, where it dies, finally free, but forever lost. Pike promises its children will be left untouched, and the entire crew bears the weight of that loss. Interwoven throughout, Umberto confronts the crew with the uncomfortable truths about killing, loyalty, and about whether the mission serves exploration or empire. But in this end, what he captures isn't propaganda, it's humanity. Ortegas confesses that Starfleet gave her belonging when she was lost, and Uhura reflects that while Starfleet is imperfect, it's made up of people who care, who try, who believe. Starfleet isn't just what makes them, it's the people who make Starfleet. The documentary closes on a happier note, the crew sharing a meal in Pike's quarters. The big, abstract questions, however, remain unanswered. What separates a federation from an empire? What is Starfleet? But Uhura gives the most honest answer we could hope for. It's the people. It's all of us. Do you know, Jodie, I struggled with this episode a little bit. I had to watch it twice. The first time I watched it, I was like, I really don't like this. I can't get into this. I found a new episode that I really hate this season. And actually, when I watched it a second time, I then was actually like, no, this makes a lot of sense. Actually, I really, really enjoy this. And I think when a show that is, let's face it, traditionally set to a format, and let's face it, Strange New Worlds likes to push those boundaries of the format. You know, it's done musicals, it's done detective novels and everything else. We've never had a documentary before in Star Trek. And actually, I think once I watched it a second time and appreciated it and actually understood some of the points of it, this episode was actually really good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I got maybe almost halfway to it, and I was, like, uncomfortable. You know, and I'm like, oh, they're doing this completely on purpose. They want us to feel that discomfort. And then once I kind of acknowledged that, then I was like, I'm in love with this episode. Like, I have nothing but respect, and it kind of really drives to the heart of Trek, and the ability to do that in such a short time frame, I think, is pretty powerful.
Yeah, because I think this is the shortest Strange New Worlds episode ever of dead on 40 minutes.
40 minutes?
I know, but they crammed a lot into that 40 minutes.
Oh, they packed it. They packed it.
But so, I do think that if they made the episode longer, I think it would have actually hurt the episode.
Yeah, I don't disagree, because it really, they really compartmentalized, I'm not talking right, but you know what I mean, and they really put things in, you know what I mean, they really put things in such a nice order, and even though there was that back and forth vibe to it, it just really resonated, especially the further the episode went along, and I think if it had gone on anymore, it would have been too much.
Yeah. I also really appreciated how they got the balance right between the ethical side of the story and the political side of the story, and especially if you take into the current landscape that we're facing and we're living in. Actually, a lot of it is very poignant. So I think, and let's face it, that's something that Star Trek does extremely well, is obviously ask the questions about what's happening in current times. You know, you've already got
we depend on it, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the way that they balanced it was really, really well thought and really well done.
Yeah, I agree, and I think they did that while maintaining that undercurrent of that philosophy of Trek.
Yeah.
Throughout, and that's a hat trick. I don't know that we see a lot of our shows and movies or anything like that kind of driving that level of balance in storytelling. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I also really appreciated, I also enjoyed when we got to see the kind of the more personal side to some of these characters. You know, you look at Ortegas is being interviewed in her quarters. She's building a motorbike. Now, you know, you don't necessarily think of Ortegas as an engineer because obviously she's at the helm, but actually it makes perfect sense that she would be as Shaw would say, a grease monkey.
Right.
And
I mean, it's a little Tom Paris nod too, right?
Exactly that. And I really loved that part on that side of the stories that we're seeing. You know, we get to see some of the slightly more intimate moments between, Umberto and Uhura, which again, it evolves the story for Uhura and it evolves her character. So again, character development and character growth here, I really enjoyed as well.
Right, I agree with you on both of those, Ortegas and Uhura, and even Spock. We get so much insight, and then Pike is very towing the line of his role as captain, as he has to. But then I really liked Una's kind of one-on-one, even though there wasn't as much as the others. But like she very much so supported that her role in supporting the captain and upholding the mission, no matter how murky things got. But she really, I think, displayed that quiet, disciplined strength that, shows why she's so indispensable as a member of this crew. And grounding. She just really grounds everything, even when times are, mostly when times are uncertain. And I think, if Boimler had seen this documentary, he would have gone nuts because he idolizes Una, and this just proved why she becomes that kind of poster child of Starfleet.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think the other thing we've got to acknowledge in the likes, though, is the way the episode was filmed. This documentary style framing, right? Like, I know you touched on it a bit, but I really think it was raw, and yet it had that cinema-like quality to it. It made it feel very different from anything we've seen, like you said, but it really forced us to see the crew in those unguarded and moments and revealing contradictions and doubts we don't usually get to see. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I felt that the episode was too polished. I think it was too well recorded, and actually I think that's a negative to the episode. I think if you kind of done a 28 days later on a DV cam, I actually think it would have actually enhanced the episode. Whereas,
a little Blair Witch kind of like,
just a little bit more rough and ready. I mean, okay, we are talking about the 23rd century here, but a camera that's the size of your fist, physics is physics. A camera the size of your fist is only going to produce somewhat of a picture, and I feel like that, they've tried to add some effects on top to kind of null it down a little bit, but I think if they just recorded it on a slightly crappier camera, it actually would have enhanced the episode. And I think that's a detriment to the episode, is the fact that it's too polished. And I also didn't like the fact that the ending was too idealistic. I think it was too polished, too neat. The whole episode was wrapped up in a nice little bow, done, dusted, move on. Whereas I feel like, especially when you're talking about these kind of ethical dilemmas and political themes, they're not so black and white. And I think that for me just doesn't quite sit right.
Sure. I think the reason I buy the ending is because we find out through Uhura in this episode that he came in with an intention. Like, he wanted to expose Starfleet as an empire, as a colonizer, as all the things he was feeling. So he wasn't looking at it from an objective perspective, as you hope a documentary filmmaker would. And then we find out in Ortega's quarters that he had to learn from her that what Starfleet meant to her and why she was towing the Starfleet line and following her mission orders, and that resonated with him because it wasn't a perspective that he had considered, that he didn't lose his sister. He actually gained her back because she found herself in Starfleet. And I think that's why there's a bow at the end of this episode. Plus, we want to feel optimistic about our Star Trek. But I don't have to say, right?
I just feel like they could have left it a little bit in the grey.
Yeah,
they could have left it open for it to be explored, not necessarily by this show, but they could have left it open to be explored by a graphic novel or by a book, or whereas this ending, it's very cut and dry. That's it, done, dusted. Thanks very much. Starfleet's out. Goodbye, and warp off, and let's have a party in Pike.
But we do know, just to play devil's advocate, but we do know that we constantly are questioning what is Starfleet.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you even look at things in the timeline order, it just doesn't get any easier for our Starfleet officers and crewmen. So I think, you can put a nice bow on it and say this is what it's about and feel good about it, but it's still going to be challenging. And I think that's why I like Una.
Yes.
Because she's
challenging that status quo a little bit. And
she is a little bit.
She's always that voice of reason, isn't she?
She is. I also have to say, in my dislike, though, I have to be low-key mad at Umberto Ortegas. Because he's just... I wanted to like him, but then he came after our Starfleet, and he was determined to expose a side we are not always confronted with. And I get that side is real, and it helps us stay in balance and all that, but Umberto, I had to warm up to him this episode, because definitely... low-key mad at Umberto Ortegas.
Absolutely. I agree with that one. Now, I think the standout for this week's episode is Celia Rose Gooding. Uhura this week was outstanding.
I mean, she embodies the whole central theme of the episode, right? It's all about the people, not the systems. And Pike wrestles with the Order, Spock risks himself with the mind meld, and it's Uhura who bridges the gap and, reaches out to the alien and uses her gift of communication and empathy. And I just think her vulnerability was on display, and she learns about a loss of that Academy roommate, and she's so grounded in that grief that she chooses still to press forward. And I love that. And of course, Celia Rose Gooding, oh my gosh, she's amazing.
No, absolutely.
Amazing.
I agree with everything. But I think just the fact that we got to see the other side to Uhura, not the... Let's face it, Uhura, I would say all the time she's on the bridge, she is the consummate professional all of the time. Even when she's around a lot of the other officers, she's the same. And we don't really get to see the lighter side of her, the more personal side of it that often. Yet this week we see a lot of it. We see those intimate moments with Ortegas. We see, the whole I've now lost my friend, that whole part as well really kind of gives you that raw emotion that was just absolutely well played.
Yeah, it was. And it's what we've kind of touched on throughout this season, is that we get these snippets of character development in each episode. Yeah. And, where we've seen more of Pelia in last week's episode, and getting some insight into her chaos. But this week we got more Uhura. There's a lot of chaos with Pelia. But yeah, I think getting to see this side and more personal side of Uhura especially was just welcomed. And I think fans across the board are going to be happy with that aspect of this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, I just think a kind of a standout is, again, the creators of Strange New Worlds, who are not afraid to push the boundaries. And again, I think it's another fantastic episode that's really well put together.
They're still forcing us to think about Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I think if you can do that after a franchise has been in existence for nearly 60 years, and we're still here talking and discussing and questioning this philosophy and its characters, hands down, bravo to the writers and directors and everyone that made this episode because of that. Thank you for keep pushing us. Make us think. And we need that. Like you said earlier in this conversation, we now, more than ever, as a society in this 21st century, we need to be thinking more critically about everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's my 2 cents.
No, agree 100% with that one. Absolutely. So to recap the episode then, Strange New Worlds throws another creative curveball this week with the franchise's first in-universe documentary episode. Whilst the show has embraced the high concept formats before, musical fairy tales and apparently even puppets coming soon, this entry feels more substantial. What is Starfleet uses the premise not just for style, but to question, explore, and ultimately reinforce the ideals that define Star Trek. Told through Beto's documentary project, the episode gives us a new perspective on life aboard the Enterprise. Long-running threads like the fallout from the Gorn attack and Beto's ever-present AI cameras are folded into something more reflective and emotional. For Uhura, this is a standout episode. Celia Rose Gooding brings depth and nuance to Nyota as she navigates loss, duty, and unexpected connection. The documentary format isn't new to TV, but it feels fresh. Clever use of future tech justifies Beto's all-seeing lens, and cutting between interviews and fly-on-the-wall moments keeps things tight and engaging. At times, it channels the emotional weight of real-world documentaries like Respetro or The Fog of War. What starts as critical expose turns into something more heartfelt, closing with a hopeful tone that, while sentimental, still feels earned. The episode also doesn't shy away from complexity. Mbenga's guided response hints at the burden of his Starfleet service. The plot echoes classic Star Trek themes, misunderstood life forms, moral ambiguity, and the ethics of intervention, with shades of TOS, like Devil in the Dark and A Private Little War. The galactic politics feel pointed, even timely, as it's clear that not every decision comes with a clean answer. But what elevates this episode is the emotional impact. We leave knowing the crew a little better, understanding the stakes more deeply, and importantly, still sitting the questions. Strange New Worlds remind us that Star Trek isn't just about exploration, it's about introspection, and this episode delivers both. My final thought is, it's a smart, emotional shift in pace that highlights what Strange New Worlds does best, balancing bold ideas with strong character work. As Season 3 deepens, the series continues to grow more confident. What is Starfleet might just be one of those most thoughtful hours yet. Thank you very much for tuning into this week's episode of 10 Forward. Remember, you can catch up more Clonestar podcasts at our website, and remember, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button as well as the little bell so you get told when we post next week's episode. But until next time, live long and prosper.